Hello, welcome to Come Follow Scripture. I'm Jim McKinney, glad to be with you today. Today we're going to cover Mosiah, chapters 7 through 10. These chapters are very interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff in here. Mainly, these chapters are the beginning of some confusion in the Book of Mormon. I remember as a young person attending early morning seminary that this is one of the places where I got confused in the Book of Mormon. I got confused because now we've gone up through Mosiah the first, King Benjamin, Mosiah the second, and now suddenly we're going to go backwards in time and have these flashbacks, multiple flashbacks that end up bringing us back up together, and eventually we come together. But I was always confused about where Zarahemla, where is that? Nephi, Lehi, I was very confused while I attended early morning seminary, which, by the way, early morning seminary is the only true seminary. Release time doesn't count, shouldn't count. Anyway, so it's a little confusing. Hopefully it won't be too bad. I'm only recently figuring out where these people went and who was doing what to whom. And anyway, it's very confusing. But let's start in Mosiah chapter 7. You'll recall we just had this great discourse of King Benjamin. His people had an amazing, very fantastic event. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch my Mosiah 4 through 6 discussion, because it's very good and it's very important to understand what this is about, because it's something we should all be seeking. But anyway, we're on to Mosiah 7. So they had peace for 3 years. King Benjamin died. His son Mosiah was being the king. He's doing a good job, making everything cool. But he had an issue. The people were bugging him about where is the group that left from Zarahemla, went down where we were before, where Mosiah the first brought the people from. Where'd the people go? They left and we haven't heard from them. So they want to know about these people. In fact, it even says, if we look at Mosiah chapter 7, verse 1, it says, the people had heard nothing from them, the people that went down there, from the time they left the land of Zarahemla, therefore they wearied him with their teasings. So they're teasing the king. You couldn't tease a king that would say off with their heads, but because Mosiah was nice, they probably could get away with teasing the king. Anyway, he relented and said, okay, I'm going to send some people. I'm going to get 16 strong men and send them down to find the people that went down before, to find Nephi, Lehi. So he put these people together. And one of the people was Ammon, their leader. The leader was Ammon. And I like what it says about Ammon, because Ammon, it seems, was a Mulekite. And Ammon was a direct descendant of Zarahemla. Well, this is the guy that the city is named after. So obviously he was a powerful, it doesn't say he was their king necessarily, but he was, a leader of the Mulekites, obviously, and Ammon was a descendant. It could be that Ammon was a direct descendant who would have been the king if the Mulekites had been ruling as they were before the Nephites showed up. So this Ammon is definitely a good dude, a big dude. He's a leader, and he's going to lead these 16 men down to find the people that went to find the land of Lehi Nephi. And I think also we see in the Book of Mormon later on, we see these groups that come in. We see the people called the king men, and we see these other groups that came in and wanted a king and felt that they should lead and different things like that. Every time I hear that, I think of the Mulekites, because the Mulekites, they came from royalty. They were Zedekiah's son and the people that went with him to come over to this other country when Zedekiah was killed and his whole family was killed. And so they came over here, and so they're royalty in a sense. And so I'm sure the Mulekites have this sense, a little bit of a sense of entitlement. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more today in our lesson. But I'm sure that often when we hear those people coming along saying, hey, we should rule, we should have a king, those kinds of things, these people might be Mulekites. Anyway, just saying. So Ammon and his group, they go down there, they get lost for 40 days. I'm not going to talk about the number 40. Some people say, well, it wasn't 40 days because 40 is a number of the blah, blah, blah. Anyway, says they're lost for 40 days. And so eventually they do come upon the land of Lehi Nephi. And what happens is Limhi, who is currently the king down there, he's out wandering around with his guards, and he says, hey, who are you? And they take Ammon and his brethren and they throw him in jail. And then he's in jail for 2 days. And obviously being in jail is not fun. But then he brings them out of jail and he said, hey, look, I should have killed you, but I have allowed you to live. And so now why don't you tell me what you were doing? And so then we have a discussion from Limhi. First, Limhi talks about, here's what our status is right now. Ammon says, hey, look, we're from Zarahemla. And Limhi's so happy. And so Limhi gives his story about what the status is and why they're in bondage to the Lamanites. And he gives a little bit of a understanding of the things that happened. Let's see what Limhi says. He says, well, first Ammon says, this is Mosiah 7:13, for I am Ammon, am a descendant of Zarahemla, have come up out of the land of Zarahemla to inquire concerning our brethren whom Zeniff brought up out of the land. And so he recognizes that, hey, Ammon these people can rescue us. And so Limhi's pretty excited. And then he says, Limhi's happy because he says, oh, I'm so happy to know that the brethren in Zarahemla are yet alive. I'm going to rejoice, and I'm going to bring my people to the temple to hear about this. The reason that he says, oh, I'm so happy, he thought the people in Zarahemla were all dead. Because we'll talk about in a second how he sent a group out to find Zarahemla. They got lost, they couldn't find it. What they did find is a land with buildings and bones, and brought back some records and breastplates and other things. But they thought, oh, this is Zarahemla. It's been destroyed. They're all dead. And came back and said, hey, bad news. So obviously, now he's pretty happy because he's like, oh, you're not dead. You're still alive. This is just like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where the people in Zarahemla said, I'm not dead yet. I think I'll go for a walk now. They really are alive. And so now he's pretty happy because, oh, you're alive. Great. So he calls the people. They come to the temple, and he's going to give a little speech. Anyway, here's some. So Limhi is aware of some of the things that his people has done. He recognizes that they are wicked people. Realize that Limhi is the son of Noah, evil King Noah, who we're going to talk about later, who's the son of Zeniff. And so we've got Zeniff, Noah, and then Limhi. And Limhi, he recognizes all of the trouble that mainly Noah caused for the people. And what does he say? This is chapter 7, verse 20. And again, that same God has brought our fathers out of the land of Jerusalem and has kept and preserved his people even until now. And behold, it is because of our iniquities and abominations that he has brought us into bondage. So he recognizes that the people were brought into bondage because of their wickedness and their disobedience. And so he's clearly in a mode of trying to do better. And then he talks about Zeniff, how Zeniff came down, how Zeniff was deceived by King Laman, and how now they're in bondage and they're having to pay a 50% tax on everything, and that's no fun. And is excited to figure out how can we get out of this difficulty with the help from these people that have come from Zarahemla. So they're pretty excited. Let's see. Oh, and also he recognizes that the wickedness of the people was quite high. He acknowledges that they killed a prophet of God. This, of course, is talking about Abinadi, and we're going to read more about Abinadi as we go along. But clearly, he's saying, hey, we these people here, we killed Abinadi. We allowed Abinadi to be killed. And that is pretty bad when you're starting to kill the prophets, and we recognize that. So he recognizes their difficult situation. And he says, who wondereth that we're in bondage? And it's no wonder, because we're not good. And then he responds about how God has promised, if you keep my commandments, you'll prosper in the land. He doesn't say those words, but that's kind of what he's saying. And he's saying we didn't keep the commandments. And then I love the last verse of chapter 7, Mosiah 7:33. But if ye will turn to the Lord with full purpose of heart and put your trust in him and serve him with all diligence of mind, if ye do this, he will, according to his own will and pleasure, deliver you out of bondage. So Limhi has great faith. He has great faith that the Lord, if they'll put their trust in him, the Lord will get them out of bondage. And so that's what he's seeking for. So that's some good information from Limhi. And so then we come in here, and Mormon comes in and says, hey, I've only written a small part of this record here about Limhi. And so sad, all the places in the Book of Mormon where Moroni or Mormon or somebody comes in and says, I've even 100th part I have not written. So much other stuff went on here, but they've tried to save the best parts, but so much we've missed. Love to see a more full record. All right, chapter 8, we get some information. Now Ammon is going to give a little speech, and he talks about King Benjamin, and I'm sure he teaches them some of the great doctrines that King Benjamin taught. And he talks about things, and then Limhi brings the record of Zeniff to Ammon and lets him read it. And he reads the record of Zeniff and all the things that happened to them as they came down, and I'm sure that was very important to them. It also includes, it says in verse 7, and the king said unto him, being grieved for the afflictions of my people, I caused that 43 of my people should take a journey into the wilderness, that thereby they might find the land of Zarahemla, that we might appeal unto our brethren to deliver us out of bondage. These are the people that went out and came back and said, oh yeah, Zarahemla is destroyed. That's who told him that. It says they were lost in the wilderness for the space of many days. They found not the land of Zarahemla, but returned, having traveled a land among many waters, the land which was covered with bones of men and buildings and all kinds, and they brought 24 plates. So not only they brought 24 plates of gold, it says they're filled with engravings and they're pure gold. Verse 10, they have brought breastplates, which are large. Again, part of pointing to the fact that the Jaredites were large. They were large people. And they're of brass, copper, perfectly sound. And so they brought back this stuff that they had found from the Jaredites. And they have these 24 plates. And they're saying, can someone interpret these records, these 24 plates? We really want to know what happened there. In fact, Limhi says, I'm desirous to know the cause of their destruction. So he wants to find out what's on these plates and why this people was destroyed. And then he says, Ammon, can you translate this? And Ammon says, no, I can't. Verse 13 of chapter 8, he says, I can assuredly tell thee, O king, of a man that can translate the records. He has wherewith that he can look and translate all records that are of ancient date, and it is a gift from God. The things are called interpreters, and no man can look in them except he be commanded, lest he should look for that he ought not, and he should perish. And whosoever is commanded to look in them, the same is called seer. And then he talks about how seer is greater than a prophet, and seer can find out a lot of things. This is referencing the Urim and Thummim, that it appears that Mosiah has this and is able then to translate records. And I think I'm going to do a post on a video on the Urim and Thummim later this week, so we won't talk too much about that. But again, he says, yeah, I know someone who can translate these 24 plates. And in verse 18 he says, God has provided a means that man through faith might work mighty miracles, therefore he becometh a great benefit to his fellow beings. And then he says, doubtless a great mystery is contained within these plates, and these interpreters were doubtless prepared for the purpose of unfolding all such mysteries to the children of men. That's part of the purpose of the Urim and Thummim, to provide for and unfold these great mysteries. Same thing Joseph Smith used to translate the Book of Mormon that we're reading now. And then verse 20, I really like verse 20 of chapter 8. Oh, how marvelous are the works of the Lord, and how long doth he suffer with his people. Yea, and how blind and impenetrable are the understandings of the children of men, for they will not seek wisdom, neither do they desire that she should rule over them. And they are as a wild flock which fleeth from the shepherd, and scattereth and are driven, and are devoured by the beasts of the forest. So, not very. Again, we have an example of the fall of these people. And how they turn to wickedness and all the things that happen to them. And again, it's a tale that we can use to look at how being disobedient to the Lord and not following his commandments can be a very difficult thing. So now we start the flashback series. We're going to flash back now, and we're going to read from, again, this is the record of Zeniff. This is Zeniff's record about what happened when they left the land of Zarahemla. And so this is kind of interesting because now we're going to hear what Zeniff has to say. Zeniff was a spy. He was sent to spy out the land and to watch the Lamanites, and they were going to destroy the Lamanites. Zeniff didn't like that, and so he opposed his leader. They had some fights. They killed one another. They went back to Zarahemla. Said, yeah, it didn't work out. Zeniff, though, as we saw in the verse in chapter 7, being overzealous to inherit the land, he said, no, these people are good. The Lamanites are okay. Let's go. He kind of changes his tune a little bit later in his record, but he says, let's go. And so in chapter 9, verse 3, again, flashback. We're going back quite a few years. Here's Zeniff. And yet I, being overzealous to inherit the land, he's obviously writing this after the fact, overzealous to inherit the land of our fathers, collected as many as were desirous to go up to possess the land, started again on our journey into the wilderness to go up to the land. But we were smitten with famine and sore afflictions, for we were slow to remember the Lord our God. So Zeniff started out not being very diligent in seeking the Lord and in looking for his guidance. And again, he's writing this later, obviously, and he recognizes the mistakes that he made. He went to King Laman. He says, hey, King Laman, you guys are okay. Let's get some land here. And he said, okay, here, you can have Lehi, Nephi, and Shiloh. You can have these two cities. Okay, great. So they go in there and they do it. And it tells us, verse 10, it was the cunning and the craftiness of King Laman to bring my people into bondage that he yielded up the land that we might possess it. Again, at the time, Zeniff didn't know this. He's writing this later about what happened and saying, now I understand these Lamanites, but I thought they were good and nice. So they were good for 12 years. That's pretty good. They had 12 years of working and doing all kinds of stuff. And it says the Lamanites grew uneasy because the Nephites were doing pretty well. And they were worried they would get too strong. And so here's verse 12. I don't think he would have written verse 12 at the time. But looking back on it, here's what he's writing. Verse 12. Talking about the Lamanites, this is Zeniff. Now they were a lazy and an idolatrous people. Therefore they were desirous to bring us into bondage, that they might glut themselves with the labors of our hands, yea, that they might feast themselves upon the flocks of our fields. And so they began to have some wars and contentions with them. And Zeniff doesn't have a very positive view of the Lamanites now when he's writing this record. But at the time, he thought, hey, they're pretty good. Let's work. We can work things out with them. They went to battle. They humbled themselves. They prayed to God. They were successful, and they killed a lot of Lamanites. The Lamanites went away. The Lamanites stopped bothering them for a while because they said, "Yeah, we can't beat the Lamanites." And again, Zeniff now began to make weapons of war and swords and clubs and all kinds of stuff so that they could fight against the Lamanites. And again, it says they had peace for 22 years. So again, they were able to show the Lamanites that they really couldn't be overtaken. But here's what happens. King Laman dies, and his son begins to rule. And his son is like, hey, I'm not going to put up with these guys. Let's go get them. And they began to come in and battle against them. Now, there's some interesting scriptures here, and I don't have too long to cover these. I'll try to cover them quickly, but chapter 10 of Mosiah has some really nice scriptures in here that I really like. And this is Zeniff, again, writing after the fact about the Lamanites and explaining how he feels about them and what he understands about them now. Here's what he says. This is Mosiah chapter 10, starting with verse 11. It says, Now the Lamanites knew nothing concerning the Lord, nor the strength of the Lord. Therefore they depended upon their own strength, yet they were a strong people as to the strength of men. They were a wild and ferocious and bloodthirsty people, believing in the tradition of their fathers. That's important. Which is this, believing that they were driven out of the land of Jerusalem because of the iniquities of their fathers, that they were wronged in the wilderness by their brethren. They were also wronged while crossing the sea. And again, they were wronged while in the land of their first inheritance after they had crossed the sea. All this because that Nephi was more faithful in keeping the commandments of the Lord. Therefore he was favored of the Lord, for the Lord heard his prayers, answered them, and he took the lead of the journey in the wilderness. Does God favor the righteous? Yes, he does. And his brethren were wroth with him because they understood not the dealings of the Lord, They were also wroth with him upon the waters, because they hardened their hearts against the Lord. And again, they were wroth with him when they had arrived in the promised land, because they said that he had taken the ruling of the people out of their hands. They sought to kill him. And again, they were wroth with him because he departed into the wilderness as the Lord had commanded him, took the records which were engraven on the plates of brass, for they said that he robbed them. And thus they have taught their children that they should hate them, they should murder them, they should rob and plunder them, and do all they could to destroy them. Therefore, they have an eternal hatred towards the children of Nephi. So here you have a perfect example of how people feel who believe that they are victims. We have so much of this victimization today in the world. So many people who say, look what those people did to us. They owe us. They should give us stuff. They wronged my ancestors. They need to give us things, and we can't do anything because those people are against us. In our own lives, we might have the victim mentality. I hear people all the time talk about how hard it is for them because other people are keeping them down. This is false doctrine. This is not true. It may be true that people are not fair or kind with us, but that is not the problem or the issue. We have to understand some basic things. So it's important that we see also that they taught their children. So generation after generation, they handed down these false things that they said about Nephi and Lehi, and they wronged us, they stole from us, they took our stuff. You need to hate these people. That is satanic. And that's what the Lamanites taught each other. And sometimes we do that ourselves. Let's look at a few scriptures. First of all, let's talk about the traditions of the fathers, because a lot of this stuff gets handed down. Generation to generation, we hand this down. And the traditions of the fathers often keep people from receiving blessings from God, for one thing. So let's go back to Mosiah chapter 1, verse 5. This is when, remember, Mosiah was teaching his sons. Mosiah chapter 1, verse 5. I say unto you, my sons, were it not for these things which have been kept and preserved by the hand of God, he's talking about the records, the brass plates and the other records, that we might read and understand of his mysteries and have his commandments always before our eyes, that even our fathers would have dwindled in unbelief. We should have been like unto our brethren the Lamanites, who know nothing concerning these things, or even do not believe them when they are taught them, because of the traditions of their fathers, which are not correct. And many of us follow the traditions that have been handed down in our families, and they are not correct, and they are satanic, and we need to stop following them. Let's go to the Doctrine and Covenants. This is Doctrine and Covenants, section 123, back to the old scriptures. Doctrine and Covenants, section 123, verses 7 and 8. 7's kind of long. Here's what Joseph Smith said here in section 123. It is an imperative duty that we owe to God, to angels with whom we shall be brought to stand, also to ourselves, to our wives and children, who have been made to bow down with grief, sorrow, and care under the most damning hand of murder, tyranny, and oppression, supported and urged on and upheld by the influence of that spirit which hath so strongly riveted the creeds of the fathers, who have inherited lies upon the hearts of the children, filled the world with confusion, and has been growing stronger and stronger, and is now the very mainspring of all corruption. And the whole earth groans under the weight of its iniquity. Verse 8, it is an iron yoke, it is a strong band. They are the very handcuffs and chains and shackles and fetters of hell. Ooh, that's good stuff. And so we see here that the traditions of the fathers, which are not correct, have a strong negative impact very often on us. And that was true with the Lamanites. They were taught to hate the Nephites, and they passed it down from one generation to another, and that is bad news. Let's look at one more. 3 Nephi chapter 3. And there are many examples of this, especially in the Book of Mormon. This is 3 Nephi chapter 3, verse 4. This is the Gadianton robbers talking about their status. Again, many hundreds of years later from Mosiah. 3 Nephi chapter 3, verse 4. And I, knowing of their unconquerable spirit, have proved them in the field of battle, and knowing of their everlasting hatred towards you because of the many wrongs which ye have done unto them. Therefore, if they should come down against you, they would visit you with utter destruction. Nobody had wronged them at all. But this was the rallying cry for them. Look how we were wronged. And there are many groups today which do the same thing. The rallying cries are, look how we were wronged, and it's a lie. They have not been wronged. And verse 10, I write this epistle unto you, Laconius, and I hope that ye will deliver up your lands and your possessions without the shedding of blood, that this my people may recover their rights and government, who have dissented away from you because of your wickedness in retaining from them their rights of government, and except ye do this, I will avenge their wrongs. I am Gideon High. So we have these groups of people throughout the Book of Mormon that believe that they were wrong and that they deserve something and that somebody should give it to them because of what happened in the past, which isn't true at all, but that's what they believe. And so we have these great scriptures on becoming a victim. The true doctrine is that we are here to act and not be acted upon. We are not victims. Let's go to 2 Nephi chapter 2, verse 13. And this is the basic doctrine around this. Elder Bednar has taught this most expertly that I can think of. So this is 2 Nephi chapter 2, verse 13. And if ye shall say there is no law, ye shall also say there is no sin. If ye shall say there is no sin, ye shall also say there is no righteousness. If there be no righteousness, there be no happiness. And if there be no righteousness nor happiness, there be no punishment nor misery. This all relates to Lehi saying, remember over in verse 11, there must needs be opposition in all things. Continuing on in verse 13, and if these things are not, there is no God. And if there is no God, we are not, neither the earth. For there could have been no creation of things, neither to act nor to be acted upon. Wherefore, all things must have vanished away. 14, again, he talks about things to act and things to be acted upon. So there are two classes of things in the world, things to act and things to be acted upon. We are created as things to act. We are here to act. We have agency and we are to act. And this is the main reason that we come to this earth, so that we can use our agency in positive, constructive ways. So I encourage you, don't be like the Lamanites. Don't be a victim. The other thing that victimization does when you have this victim mentality is there is somebody who really wants you to be a victim. That is Satan. Satan loves when you're a victim because he can put in your mind thoughts that relate to, oh, look what happened to me, and poor me, and oh, it's so difficult for me, and I can't do this. Very easy for Satan to tempt you when you always believe that you're a victim. And this is very common today, and we see it everywhere, not just in certain places, but everywhere, among all people, among members of the church, many members of the church. I listen to them talk about how people wronged them. And if you have thoughts in your mind, oh, my parents wronged me, my grandparents wronged me, these other people wronged me, my job wronged me, my spouse wronged me, my kids wronged me, that's Satan. Satan wants you to feel wronged by others so that you can feel like a victim, so that he can easily tempt you to do things that are incorrect and ignore the commandments because, well, you were wronged and so you shouldn't have to keep the commandments or shouldn't have to do this or that because, well, these other people weren't wronged but you were and you're the victim. Don't do it. It's satanic, and we should not be victims. We are here to act, not to be acted upon. And I promise you that the Lord will strengthen you and bless you and lift you up as you take responsibility for your own life and for yourself and for your actions, and you move away from becoming a victim and listening to Satan to be somebody who takes his agency seriously and goes forward and acts and isn't acted upon. Oh, I have a quote I wanted to read. This is Daniel L. Hallstrom of the 70. Quote, if you feel you've been wronged by anyone or anything, deal with the matter directly and with all the strength you have, and without delay, turn to the Lord. Let him share your burden, allow his grace to lighten your load. Never let it disable you spiritually. Do not follow the traditions of the fathers that are wrong, that pass down these hatreds and these victimizations and these feelings of I deserve something because people weren't nice to me. Don't do it. Tell Satan to get away and take control of your life and take control of your actions and do the things that the Lord wants us to do and follow his commandments. And I promise you that you'll be blessed and that you will have more of the Spirit of our Heavenly Father with you to guide you and direct you. So, that's all I have to say about that. Until next time, keep studying the Scriptures. Bye.